Teammates, I'm really glad to be here today, and I want to talk about a topic that can absolutely change your life for the better, like by tomorrow, if you can figure out how to understand it and how to actually apply it. And yes, it's about control, but it also has to do with patience. Okay, so that's going to be our topic today. And as always, make sure you jump in those comments with your own point of view. Happy to have that discussion live. Or you can jump in the comments with anything you'd like me to cover in another of our Teammate Talks episodes. I'll cover anything from most topics outside of religion and politics. But if you want to talk about philosophy or parenting or mental health or martial arts or something along those lines, I'm more than happy to have that discussion with you, especially if it's related to character development, psychology. That's kind of where my that's where I stand. That's where my knowledge goes, right? And I also want to bring up something because this had to do with someone I got into it with a little bit this last week on social media, and it has a lot to do with like mental health and stuff like that too. But like first up, you have to learn to take responsibility, right? For yourself, for your actions, for your words. It is too easy for a lot of us to use something called the agentic state. Now, if you don't know what that is, you can Google it, but it's a very simple concept. It's been proven over and over and over again that people, otherwise good, moral, virtuous, upstanding people, will absolutely do evil and awful things if they're told to by someone they see as an authority who knows better than they do. That's known as the agentic state. So that's kind of that. It goes into logical fallacies too, like appealing to virtue and that sort of thing. But you have to be cautious about that whole agentic state thing if you really want to change your life. You have to make sure that you are the one in control, that you are the ones making the decisions. And a lot of that starts with understanding how people are going to try to persuade you and how people are going to try to manipulate you. But that's not really what I want to get into today. What I want to get into today, like I said, is about control and it's about patience. But I think the first thing that we really need to do is to define patience because it never fails. When I ask a class in here, no matter what age, including the adult classes, and I say, can you give me a definition for patience? The most common answer is waiting or dealing with people. And while those aren't necessarily wrong, they kind of don't really hit the whole thing either. Oh my gosh, hope my computer doesn't die in the middle of this video. All right, what patience actually means is to accept things calmly. What's up, J Squad? Good to see you here. Appreciate the comment. What patience actually mean is to accept things calmly, right? To accept the situation. So waiting calmly is a way to show patience. Dealing with somebody who is annoying you in an accepting and calm fashion, that is showing patience, right? But this all kind of starts with one simple concept that can actually be really difficult to understand and learn to practice, and that's what I want to get into. But this concept will change your life if you can learn to understand it. Now, here's the thing: it's about learning what's in your control and what is not in your control. See, like we might like to think otherwise, but all we can really control is ourselves. Yeah, you got a shout out. All we can really control is ourselves. So, what is in our control? Our decisions, our actions, our reactions, our words, and to some degree, because psychology, there's not like a lot of training, but to some degree, and with training, you can have some control over your thoughts and emotions as well. What's up, Vengeance? Good to see you, Charlie Bear. Absolutely. Yeah, no, I see you guys there. Appreciate you jumping on here. So, those are the things that are inside of our control. The things that we do, the things that we say, the way that we react. A guitarist? No, I can't play the guitar. The only instrument I was ever able to play was the trombone, and nobody likes wanting me to get on or do trombone stuff. No, my main thing is like I do martial arts and I do parkour, and I use those things as a way to teach virtue, character development, coping skills, how to not be deceived and manipulated, that type of thing. And that's what I'm talking about today. Like I said, one very simple concept that can absolutely change your life: patience, acceptance, calm. But this starts with understanding what's in our control and what's not. So I'm in my control. My decisions, my actions, my reactions, my words, and to some degree, if I train for it, my thoughts and emotions can be in my control. Now, that said, remember that if you have certain mental health struggles, some of this might be more difficult to control than others. So, for example, I've been trying to live by this topic for like a decade or decade and a half, but it didn't always help for me. And it wasn't until I realized that I had a legit mental health struggle that I needed medication for, not generalized anxiety or depression. I have bipolar disorder, bipolar 1, right? What's my favorite thing to do in the day? Video games, man. Video games. Absolutely. Love my video games. I like to work out. Not necessarily traditional weightlifting and stuff. I like to hit the bags, do my martial arts stuff. In fact, I'm going to be doing a little capoeira later today. This is one of my favorite arts. All right, back to my topic. Let's talk about things that are not in your control. Could someone name something that's not in your control in the comments, right? I mean, this one I think is pretty obvious. What's not in your control is things like nature or other people or outcomes. For example, you can't decide which way you want the wind to blow, right? It just doesn't work that way. The best you can do is change your perspective on that, right? I don't know. No, I don't know if you could say you're late, but my day's going pretty good. Just trying to get through my stuff. Now, so we talked about what's in our control. We talked about what's not in our control. In particular, it's important to remember that other people are not in your control. Their actions, their decisions, outcomes of situations are not in your control, right? So let me explain what I'm getting at here. The best you can do is hope to influence other people or situations in a way that gets you the best odds for your desired outcome, but you can't fully control that outcome, right? Doing all the things right doesn't necessarily guarantee that the outcome will be what you want. Why does my hair look cool? I don't know, man. I just woke up like this. I didn't even comb my hair, right? So let's take the archer's paradox. Have you guys ever heard the archer's paradox before? An archer has a lot they control about shooting an arrow, right? They can control how much and how they train. They can control their stance. They can control how they aim. They can control how they draw and all kinds of other things. But once that arrow leaves the bow, how much control do they actually have over it? And the answer is simple. None. All right, man, you have a good night's sleep. No gaming. Nice to see you on here. Well, they don't have any control of that arrow once it leaves the bow. It's not in their control if the wind whips up and knocks the arrow off course. It's not in their control if the target they're shooting at moves once that arrow leaves the bow, right? So this is known as the archer's paradox. So see, the archer can use things he can control to influence the situation to give him better odds of the best possible outcome, but he can't control everything that has to do with that outcome. What's my favorite game back in the day or now? Oh my gosh, man, that's a hard one. Like, I like retro games. I grew up on the old school Marios, so those have a soft spot in my heart. The original Castlevanias were some of my favorites. I'm playing Remnant 2 right now. That's one of my favorite more recent games. I'm also playing Silksong. Got to be honest, I love Silksong. Like, I love Hollow Knight Silksong. That's a great game. All right, back to my topic. So the archer can give themselves the best possible chance of the outcome they want, but they can't control the outcome. They can't control everything that might happen from the time the arrow leaves the bow. So let's talk about how to apply this in your life. I'm going to use kids, for example, on this next one. My next example is going to be kids, right? So let's apply this to kids in school. You can control what you study. You can control how you study using the most effective methods, which I've done podcasts on before too. The most effective method isn't cramming. It's studying for 20 minutes with a 5-minute break or 30 minutes with a 10-minute break and continuing to do that. But you can control how you study, what you study. You can control the methods you use to study. You can do a lot of things to give yourself the best possible chance of getting a good grade. But what can you not control? You can't control what questions are on the test. You can't control how the teacher chooses to grade it. You can't control several aspects there, right? And I'm getting to my point, I promise. But this doesn't mean you should do nothing to try to influence the outcome. You should absolutely do your best to give yourself the best possible outcome. Discipline would require putting forward the best effort no matter what. What I'm getting at here is that you have to stop putting so much emotional emphasis on the outcome itself and redirect that emphasis towards improving the effort. Right? So what I mean by that is, instead of worrying and stressing that you didn't get the outcome you wanted, instead focus on your input and trying to improve that input. And did you at least try your best in a level that you could be proud of, even if the outcome on that test or the archer shot wasn't exactly what you were going for, right? And that's an important skill. Oh, I just lost Facebook there. I'll go ahead and continue on YouTube. And that's an important skill. What's my favorite moment in my lifetime that I want to do? I'm not sure I understand that question. Favorite moment in your lifetime that you want to do? I'm not sure. Like, this is going to sound crazy, though. It's about a favorite moment in my lifetime. I think, obviously, my son being born is going to rank up there, right? Like, top. But favorite moment in my lifetime. Honestly, I think it was when I was at my lowest. Like, when I got out of homelessness as a teen, that was one of my favorite moments in life. Getting out of homelessness is a huge thing, especially if you were homeless as a teenager, like at 16 years old. So like, that's a huge proud moment for me. Never give up. Yeah, it's some good advice. That is some good advice. All right, so back to what we were talking about. Once I can understand what's in my control and what I can't, I can then begin to train myself to look at my anxieties and my worries and the things that are really bothering me. And then every time I catch myself stressing about something, I can ask myself, is this thing I'm stressing about actually in my control or not? Because if it's not, then I don't want to spend any time stressing about that outcome that's outside of my control. Instead, how about I use that energy to on something I can control, such as training myself or training my reactions or training my behaviors. Or the ultimate goal of this is to learn to choose to live by the virtues that are important to you. If compassion is important to you, that would be a virtue that you enjoy. If integrity is important to you, discipline is important to you, these are all virtues, right? And I think everybody needs to choose the virtues they see are most important in their life. And that gives you a roadmap. So every time you run into stress or decision-making paralysis or something like that, you can lean back on your virtues and say, what would be the decision that best fits the type of person that I want to be? You know what I'm saying? Right? But once you learn to realize what's in your control and what's not, you can start to emphasize the things that are in your control and start to try to let go of things that are not inside your control. But you have to be like a little bit radical about it, right? And this can be applied to bullying. This can be applied to all kinds of things, right? Dream game to buy back then. Dude, I still own all the games I've ever bought. All of them, all the way back to the original NES, right? Like I have all the games I've ever owned. I have all the systems I've ever owned. I still have all that. So like, I don't really have a dream game to get or anything like that. Like if I want a video game, I go buy it, right? I just go do it because that's in my control. But like I said, once you get to the point that you can choose or you can see what's in your control and what's not, you can focus on the things you can actually do to improve your life and stop worrying as much on the things that you can't really do anything about. And you can still put your best foot forward, try to influence situations, but stop letting your self-esteem be based on the outcome of a situation. Start basing your self-esteem and your self-complimenting on the effort you put into the situation. Did you try your best? Did you do everything to the best of your knowledge and ability? Thank you, Charlie Bear. Or Charlie Beer. I'm sorry, that's beer, not bear. My bad. Anyway, hang on one second, guys. I got to do something real quick. Sorry, I promised my wife I would plug this in, and I better do that before I get in trouble. There we go. All right, so yeah. So that's kind of, and again, like I said, this ties back to patience. So patience is about accepting things calmly. Once you accept what's in your control and what's not in your control, it allows you to reprioritize your perspective. And I've done podcast episodes on this before. Perspective is everything. How you look at something changes how you feel about it. And I know that's like sounds crazy, but it really, really does, right? Like the way you look at something or the words you use to describe something will change the way you feel about it, which is why like some ancient philosophies used to try to say, you know, don't claim that things are good or bad, claim that they're preferred or not preferred, desired or not desired. And that helps to change your perspective around the situation. One of those ancient philosophies also had a very interesting practice. They're talking about preferred, not preferred. Oh, I kind of lost my train of thought there. Talking about preferred, not preferred. Gosh, I really can't remember what it was now. Lost my train of thought. My bad. It happens to me all the time. But changing your perspective on a situation can absolutely change the way you feel about it. Oh, that's what it was. This ancient philosophy had this practice, this concept they called amor fati, or in other words, love of fate. Right. And the concept is to love everything that happens to you, no matter how chaotic, no matter how outside of your control, to see it as a bit of a challenge. Like the universe is challenging me to see if I can get the best possible outcome out of this situation. One of my favorite stories about that is from like ancient Greek times. And there's written records of this, where this young man was traveling across one of the seas in that area on a boat, and a big storm whipped up. And the storm obviously is not inside their control. And this person expressed that them and the other passengers on the boat were terrified. They all thought they were going to die. It was a terrible, terrible storm. And then this guy had a bit of an epiphany. He realized that the storm was not in his control. The fact of whether this storm killed him or not was not in his control. The only thing that was in his control is how he chose to look at the situation. And so he chose to look at it how many of us these days look at a roller coaster ride and just started laughing maniacally. Other people wrote in journals later that were also on the same boat about him laughing maniacally and even climbing on the mast and yelling and having a good old time, because it absolutely changes the way you see something. So if you want to get into science on this, neurologically speaking, there is very little difference between fear and excitement, like physically. Physically, there's very little difference in your brain between fear and excitement. So if you have a fear response to something, you can learn to train it to become more of an excitement response, because excitement also comes with anxiety, right? It comes with a mix of fear. And so that's one of the easiest shifts you can make in perspective, is every time you go to face a fear, which I'm going to do an episode 2 on how to face your fears properly, because there's a right way and a wrong way to go about it. But whenever you face your fear, if you can reframe that and say, I'm not scared, I'm excited at the chance to see how well I can handle this challenge, and you can slowly change the way your body and your brain responds to this kind of external stimuli, which is why I said in the beginning of the video that with training, you can have some control over your thoughts and your actions. So begin to work on the things you can't control and stop wasting emotional energy on the things you can't. It's not about avoiding or suppressing feelings we don't like either. It's about learning to acknowledge them, but not that those emotions control our actions. It's about slowly training your brain to emphasize what you can control instead of focusing on the things you can't and worrying about the things you can't, right? So this concept, guys, will save you or your kids, if you teach them this, a lot of grief when there is a realization that you can't control how others choose to see you. You cannot control how others choose to perceive you. All that you can control is how you decide to show up in the world and who you want to be. You can control like the virtues that you think are important. You can control your decision making and reactions around those virtues so that you show up in the world the way you truly want to show up in the world, but you can't control how other people choose to see you. For example, I had a guy call me straight up evil the other day, told me I'd never faced real evil in my life, then turned around and called me the devil. And then he turned around and claimed that, I had, what did he say? He said, I never faced evil. He called me the devil, told me I was evil myself. And then he said that I have never had a positive influence on anybody in my life. I kind of like took pride in somebody calling me the devil. Nobody's called me the devil since I was a teenager. Like, it's been a while, right? I kind of want to have a shirt made. So-and-so called me the devil, but whatever, right? And then I asked him, well, what do you think is evil? And he quoted some scripture, biblical stuff, whatnot. And I was like, dude, you have no idea what true evil is. So I gave him a little bit of my childhood. Look, I was sexually abused by a very close family member that was a male. I was sexually abused by 2 teachers. I was sexually abused by a church leader at the church I went to, all before I even turned 13. I ended up as a homeless 16-year-old, and local churches actually protested my right to sleep in parks because they didn't want me in town. One church in my local hometown protested to the school that I should not be allowed in school with their children. Like, that's my experience of evil, right? Like, yeah, don't tell me I've never faced evil, right? Don't tell me I've never overcome that. As far as having a positive experience with people, look up the reviews of Peace Warriors Martial Arts in Newcastle, Oklahoma, anywhere. Look up those reviews anywhere. You're going to see hundreds of stories of ways I've helped people. Oh my gosh, there was a question I missed. What's your biggest fear in your lifetime of your son and his future? Oh my gosh, if something happened to my son before if he leaves this world before I do, that is certainly an absolutely massive fear, right? At the same time, I want to make sure that when I leave this world, he is well equipped to handle it. I would say that's probably one of my biggest fears in my life, right? And I have other fears too. We all have fears, right? But death is not one of them for me. I know that's usually the thing people talk about when they talk about fear. They talk about like death. I'm not really afraid of death, and it has nothing to do with my personal beliefs. It has to do with my personal philosophy. See, death is not in my control, right? Even my health is not in my control, really. I can influence my health for the best outcome. I can exercise, I can eat right, I can hydrate. I can do a lot of things to influence my health, but that doesn't mean I can control whether I get cancer or not, or control whether I get a heart attack or not, right? So I recognize that health is outside of my control. I also recognize that death is outside of my control. It's going to happen. It's a natural process. It is part of nature. Therefore, why should I fear something that everybody faces? Why should I fear something that is natural, right? So like, that's not a fear of mine, but all of my fears definitely relate to my son. Something terrible happening to my son or something along those lines. I don't know how I'd handle that. And my favorite destination go to for a holiday, home. Now, if I could go anywhere though, like anywhere, cost wasn't an object, Ireland would be my first one. My great-grandparents were from Ireland. Scotland, Ireland, definitely anywhere in between those. I would love to go back to Australia and visit some family there, and I've always wanted to see Italy. Outside of that, home. Like, I don't care, right? The thing about America, I've traveled a lot in America, and the thing about here is that too many places have all the same things. Like, I remember when I was a kid, you could go from town to town to town and find all sorts of stores that were mom and pop stores that were just from those towns. You could find all kinds of unique crafts, craft shows, all kinds of cool stuff. But now when I go town to town, it's like it's the same stuff, almost all the same stuff everywhere you go. So I'm not like big on that. Where am I from? I'm from Oklahoma. Right now, my studio is in Newcastle, Oklahoma. I live across the road in Tuttle. I am originally from Wyandotte, Oklahoma, an even smaller town up in the northeast corner of Oklahoma. Yeah, that's where I come from. California, oh, that's wildly different. Great grandparents from Germany moved to Argentina in the 40s. That's cool. I have a grandparent. I think it's a great, maybe a great great. I have a grandparent from Germany. My stepbrother chose to live in Germany for a long time after he retired from the army. He chose to live in Germany. He absolutely loved it, right? But getting back to my topic, all that really matters when you come across these challenges is your perspective on them, and do you follow your virtues? Do you make decisions based on your principles and deeply held beliefs that are the type of person you want to be? And do you regularly question yourself to make sure that what you're doing is the impact you want it to have, right, on the world? Now, you can't control that impact, but you can control the way you go about having a potential impact, right? So how proud are you of the way you've handled challenges thrown your way, regardless of the outcome? Did you do your best in the situation you were thrown into? Your actions reflect who you want to be. Those are the important parts when it comes to patience, accepting calmly and learning what's in your control and what's not, and how to make decisions based on your principles instead of just whichever way the wind blows, right? And how to learn how to prioritize the important things that you can control, how to prioritize what you can control and try not to prioritize the things you can't. Understand you can influence them, but also understand that there's never 100% odds of success, right? I'm a martial artist. Let's talk about that. There is no technique that has a 100% chance of success. If you train at the studio or go to the studio and they say, this technique works every time, or every time you grab like this, do this, it'll work every time, they're lying to you because they're trying to sell their programs. I will never say that. There's no 100% of the time. The best you can do is train it to the best of your ability to slowly increase your odds of success. But I would say those odds of success are never really get above 85%, right? There's always that chance. There's always that weird thing. But in the end, you or your kids may not be able to control bullies or how other people choose to see you, but you can't base your life on what those people think your life should be. You know what I mean? You can't let the fear of getting bullied let you change your principles or your deeply held beliefs or the things you see as virtues. You can't let the mean people dictate who you are. And that's the biggest problem with bullying, in my opinion, especially with young, impressionable kids, is they get bullied, then they feel ashamed for things that are important to them. So they try to change against their own nature, against the things that are important to them so that they can fit in, because they begin to prioritize what other people think instead of prioritizing what they think of who they are. This is one of the biggest negative outcomes of bullying. So you can't control bullying, and bullying will never be out of the equation. You could go train, you could do something to gain confidence in your ability to de-escalate, avoid, or deal with bullying, even if it comes to physical. I'm a martial artist. I have to throw that out there, right? But you can't control whether they try to bully you or how people choose to see you. Only thing you can control is how you choose to show up in the world. Do not base your decisions, any decisions, on what other people see of you or think of you, right? Don't base your life on what the bullies think your life should be. Don't do that. Choose that for yourself. Never let that part of you get destroyed by I'm trying to censor myself, by jerks. Like, that's not the word I want to use, but I think you understand what I'm getting at right here. You have to have the confidence to decide that you want the freedom to decide for yourself who you want to be, and then go about and live your life that way. Now, y'all, I got to jump off here. I'm sorry. I got to go start my capoeira workout. Appreciate all the questions. Appreciate you guys jumping on, commenting on YouTube. I really appreciate my YouTube audience here. I know some of y'all, I know my live videos don't matter to some of y'all because y'all kids or whatever and don't want to hear about character development and all that. But because when I do this in my studio, I do it in age appropriate ways and we do it short. It's like 3 to 5 minutes per class. We'll go over how to conduct yourself in different ways and what different virtues are and what they mean and things like that. We do a different one every week and we apply it throughout the class. However, that's a lot more interesting. When I get on here, I usually kind of design this more for parents or adult martial arts students or adults who struggle with mental health or struggle with anxiety or just being themselves or struggle with stress. I'm all about teaching how to cope with stress. And I got to be honest, this topic I've talked about in this video is one of the most important ones I've ever learned and tried to practice in my life. Now, am I the best at it? No. Do I do it every day? No. I wish I could. I wish I did. I'm working on it, but I'm not always the best at it. But what I try to remind myself of is like two phrases. One, amor fati, love of fate. No matter what happens, good, bad, or otherwise, trying to smile at it and see it as a challenge the universe has thrown me to see how well I can cope with that impossible scenario or whatever it might be. And being a business owner, guys, I deal with that all the time, right? So like that's a big part of it. Another one, knowing what you can control and what you can't, and learning to prioritize spending your time and energy on the things you can't control and trying to remind yourself of the things that you can't or the things that are up to nature or whatever. And the third one is according to nature. That's one of my like favorite phrases. I throw it out there a lot because like if I'm in a fight, right, and I throw a combo, I throw something out there, right? I can do everything in my power and my training to give myself the best odds of success of hitting the target and gaining ground in this fight, but I can't necessarily control their reaction to it. So if I throw something, anytime you throw something, you're open, right? So if I throw something and they just happen to throw something at the same time that catches me, that part wasn't in my control. And I have to like understand that the best I can do is train in a way to not leave myself open for that technique in the future. You know what I mean? So those three concepts are absolutely life-changing. But like I said, start with learning what's in your control and what's not, and begin to notice that when you have bad or negative emotions, don't suppress them. Just remind yourself over and over, this is a valid feeling. I have a valid reason to feel this way. However, nothing about what's making me feel this way is in my control, or maybe part of it is, and I'll just focus on those parts of it that are in my control, because there's no point in wasting the emotional energy on the things that aren't. And through this practice, you can learn to change your perspective. Or as I tell my students, by the time they hit the black belt levels, they should have a completely different mindset about fighting and sparring than they did as beginners. At the black belt levels, it should become a game. It should be playful. It should be like smiling at the challenge. And by the time you're at that black belt level, you should desire and want and love to fight people that are better than you, because those are those challenges that give you the opportunity to see your mistakes and opportunity to grow. Don't sit there and spar the beginners all the time when you're a black belt. Go seek out people that are better than you, right? Go seek out people that can beat you. Better yet, go train someone to be better than you. Train them to be your training partner, right? Stuff like that. I got a little off track there. But like I say, you know, I want my black belts by the time they get to that level to see it more playfully. And the biggest mindset thing I look for, if I see if somebody's ready for the black belt test or not, is who they blame when they get hit, or who they blame when they get hit hard or really knocked. Do they blame the other person and say, oh, you hit me too hard. Oh, you blah, 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 blah. Or do they take personal accountability, smile and go, hey, man, that was a good shot. I should have seen that coming. I should have defended against that, and take responsibility for the fact that you get hit. Because if you're sparring, right, that's a consensual fight in all reality. If you're with certain rules, consensual rules, but actually our sparring has no rules. Our only rule is don't injure your partner, but that's beside the point. So we do relatively light sparring, light to the head, moderate to the body, heavy to the legs. Does that make sense? Like, you know, whatever your body can take without risking in too much risk of injury. And so that's a big part of it. But I look in my black belts, whether I decide if someone's ready to try that black belt test or not, which by the way is a 6-hour test. But when I look at whether they're willing to try it, I look at who they blame or whether they take accountability when they get hit. So if they're in that consensual situation and they get knocked hard, do they blame the other person, or do they get mad at the other person, or do they go, man, I should have caught that. Man, I should have seen that coming. You know what I mean? And take responsibility for it, because that's a shift in perspective that will allow you to grow rather than shrink, right? So that's what I look for when it comes to people being ready for the black belt test. Real eye-opening session of always my buddy. I'm not even reading the rest of that. Oh my gosh, dude, what are you talking about? Oh my gosh. You know, I kind of understand. I recently last year had to pay thousands of dollars in medical bills because 4 or 5 times a week I was waking up in the morning so sick to my stomach, like vomiting awful. And after thousands of dollars of medical bills, I discovered that I've developed an extreme lactose intolerance. So I kind of understand what you're talking about. Anyway, I've hit my 30-minute mark. I got to jump off here. So till I see you guys again, be the best teammates you can be and be the best at being you.